Hi, everyone. And as always, welcome to Research America's Alliance discussions. This one is one so looking forward to. I really, again, thank you for joining us today. And as you've heard me say before, if your organization is not a member, I hope you'll reach out to me or to Joel Nepomuceno. I'm so sorry, Joel, I always do this. Nepomuceno, who is our Director of Membership, and his email is in the chat. We'd just like to know more about your priorities as an organization and how we can support your efforts. So if you are with an Alliance member, you can always shoot me an email, call anytime, call any of the team anytime. So anyway, today we're joined by Megan Frisk. Dr. Frisk is the Director of International Affairs at ARPA-H. And I have got to say that our audience has submitted terrific and a large number of questions in advance. And so with that, I think we're just going to roll right in. I think we're going to get to talk about some of Megan's past and how she came to ARPA-H as part of our question and answer process. So Megan, to start with, could you kind of set the stage for us? And in your view, what does ARPA-H do differently from, more traditional, not traditional is the wrong word, from the kind of research grants, for example, that NIH funds?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to set the stage. I definitely at the top here, Ellie, want to thank you and your team for setting up this event and allowing me to talk to the community. I wish I could see you all.
Can't we do that? Oh, we can't.
No,
Darn
it's
it.
okay. It's okay. I'll crash some system with all the faces, but it's really great to be here and so excited to engage the Research America community about ARPA-H. So yes, it's a really good question, and it's one that we get all the time, kind of how we have a very robust health research enterprise already in the US government, just really producing remarkable research outcomes. And the question of, what does ARPA-H do differently? What is our unique fit here within that research enterprise? And I guess I like to say that we take on those really challenging health problems in pursuit of those high impact solutions. We're modeled off of the business model pioneered by DARPA, and we can get into that a little bit more. But if you think of kind of a valley here in between NIH, which is investing heavily in the basic biomedical research and really understanding mechanisms of disease and that discovery process. And on the other end of this valley being industry, where you have commercial products and services that have a viable kind of pathway to market. We really sit in that middle space, so that I like to call the valley of opportunity. So we're bridging the basic biomedical research and that industry development. And if you think about the way we formulate, or our program managers formulate their programs, they all are what if statements. And the what if you could do X as a way to transform or unlock a solution in human health. And that's where ARPA-H would come in. We would come in to de-risk that space, to take those multiple shots on goal, to really see if we can pilot or have a minimum kind of viable experiment that will allow us to move forward in that area. So you could say we might be investing in where some of those unfundable ideas, the ones that aren't being touched at either end of that valley. So I guess in short, Ellie, our objective is really to take those big bets. We believe we have that mandate to take on that high risk, high impact space. And really be that de-risker, that investor in the novel approaches and technologies and platforms that could really transform human health.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
it's great. And,
it's an exciting
I think one of the
space.
things that seems so cool about what ARPA-H is doing, they bring in a program manager, and then, as I understand it, that program manager brings in teams that are all trying to answer that what if question, and maybe probably in different ways. There probably is a thread of commonality, but right. And so it's a race against time and a race against these teams that could have engineers and scientists and a manufacturing, late stage manufacturing experts. It's a super cool model.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so different, and DARPA has paved the way in this model for so many years, and this is our chance to take that to human health. And as you mentioned, the program managers, they really are kind of the change makers and the lifeblood of this agency. They're the ones that come in with that big idea, that what if question, and then they do, as you described, all these different teams. They design a program. How are these teams going to get to a solution? And they may all have different ways to get there, and then figuring out who comes out the other end. And so it's really, I think our program managers are one of our superpowers of the agency, and really just their ability to have a totally wide scope of what are those what if questions. They get to be disease agnostic, therapeutic modality agnostic. They can cover, TRLs 1 through 9. They are just really all about how to tip over a tough question into that convincing scale and be able to make an impact on human health.
I think in that explanation, you show how ARPA-H is complementary to, but certainly not redundant to NIH, which kind of produces the underlying knowledge. They uncover the knowledge that allows you to keep rolling towards solutions. And in its clinical research arena too, they're looking at discrete questions or they're doing a natural history study that produces important knowledge. So that was very useful, and I think it answered some of the pre-submitted questions, or began to. And this is a let me turn to your role, and if you could tell us a little bit more just about what your position looks like at ARPA-H and in the international affairs role, what that means, that would be just fabulous.
Yes, happy to talk so much about international. I mean, that is why I've come here. And I mentioned one of our superpowers is our program managers, but another maybe emerging superpower of the agency is our ability to fund internationally, and to really have quite a bit of flexibility in how we connect with the research community globally, patients, researchers, international organizations, other funders, technologists, entrepreneurs. How are we going to engage that community really thoughtfully and intensively? We work on very short timelines. So how are we going to pull together this community to solve some of these challenges? And so that was exactly what inspired me to come here. I came from the State Department, where in many ways was doing kind of a similar type of role in terms of international science and technology cooperation. But here have the opportunity to work hand in hand with these program managers and these mission office directors who are just brilliant individuals from all different kind of walks of life, PhDs, engineers, clinicians, still practicing clinicians, emergency room physicians, and be able to talk to them and hear about their programs and then say, well, what can we do internationally on that? What are some opportunities? Where are the hotspots of excellence around the world? And where are the key patient populations? Where are the important markets that you might want to deliver solutions into or emerge into? And so really kind of building out that holistic or that comprehensive look at how the global community could be brought to bear on ARPA-H funded research, but not just kind of how are people kind of coming to us. How are we learning from the international community, their successes, their pitfalls? How can we bring that knowledge into the design of a program even, or our thinking around our research priorities, to make sure that we're really intentional in how we're pursuing these very intense kind of 3, 4, 5 year programs. So we may as well learn from the rest of the world that has also been doing
Yeah.
so much in many of these spaces. So that is my role here in short.
And Megan, is it accurate to say that ARPA-H can work in that space in at least 2 dimensions? So let's say a program officer or program manager's potential one came in and said, I think we need a single platform for all fungal diseases. Now, I may be belying my ignorance right or left, but let's say if we had that, then we could get it valley fever, we could get it neglected tropical diseases, we could, that's a even though that might be a big global, might be a big global piece to that. That's a possibility, right? A person can come in the door with a global threat as long as there's relevance to the United States. And then they could also come in and say, listen, I think this research, the clinical trials network should be through Science for Africa. It should be the clinical trials network in Africa or something like that. Or one of the teams could work with that team, right? So both of those are possibilities in the ARPA-H model. Is that right?
Yeah. So if we took those 2 examples, kind of on the first one, we want to partner with, fund the international community. And the importance is that the research solutions and the health challenges identified need to be relevant in the United States. But as we know, it is almost impossible to find some health issues that the United States faces that aren't faced around the world as well.
Right.
So there's a lot of natural cross-pollination and that interconnectedness. And so that's important. But we also, because so much of what we do is platform-based and kind of almost agnostic to the solution. So for example, we have one program called Embody that's on lowering the cost of immunotherapies. There's no real prescription in what are those solutions that one's going to bring to the table.
Yes.
And so a lot of it's in the eye of the beholder, what that proposal is going to come forward and say they're going to do. And so many of the solutions could be applicable around the world. And then in your second example, of course, we're absolutely looking for the best minds, talents, facilities, networks, capabilities, and of course resources, because we all have finite resources in this world. Right. And where can we force multiply to solve these health challenges?
What a great answer. So, you know what, I think we'll move to some of the pre-submitted questions. You and I have talked about the number that have come in, and I apologize in advance. I know we have some questions in the chat, but we have an obligation, right, to start with our pre-submitted and then move over to the chat. So I'm going to ask for some assistance here. Savannah, if you wouldn't mind joining us. And we can kind of, in a way, we can double team. So I'm going to check out the questions in the chat. If you wouldn't mind starting with the pre-submitted questions. Poor Megan, we're kind of coming at you from all sides. But
yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks, Ellie. And thanks again, Megan, for joining us. So one of our first pre-submitted questions, which I know we've talked a little bit about this, but maybe we could dive a little bit deeper in, is that is, what are ARPA-H? What is ARPA-H's current top priorities, and are these priorities limited to academic research? And maybe if you wanted to also add on, because this combines another question in the international space specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I touched on it briefly, but didn't really dive into how we're structured in terms of our research priorities. So because we are disease agnostic, we don't have like a dedicated line in cancer or immunology or allergy or something like that. We are completely agnostic to that and instead focus on mission areas. So we have 4 mission areas. One is on the future of health science. So that's the really cool novel technology and technology platforms. And so back when there was a lot of mRNA vaccine work, that would be the type of office that launched some of that kind of those novel platforms. Resilient systems. So thinking of what's not working in our system. This could be data sharing. This could be cybersecurity. This could be issues with reimbursement or care models. So what's not working in the system? But I also like to think about also how are those cool new technologies and platforms being integrated into our system. So this is a really important office in kind of pulling the thread across the board. The third area is scalable solutions. So how are we going to scale these new platforms, approaches, technologies up and out? And that is really, we just hired that last mission office director. And this is where you're going to start thinking about things like biomanufacturing, things like supply chains, and kind of where are we engaging and meeting patients and systems around the world. And then the last is on proactive health or a preventative medicine office. And this is keeping people from becoming patients. It probably doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. And they prioritize within there and they do analyses. So they have all the program managers and they will do analyses through these mission offices in terms of what are some areas that we need to move into. While we can't pick areas, we don't prescribe the research focus. Program managers come in with those ideas, but we can say, okay, if we need more work, we're interested in doing more work in mental health, we need program managers in mental health, or if we're interested in doing more in women's health, can we find champions, program managers that want to come in and move that research agenda along? So to your question though about is it just academic, and 100% not. In fact, our performers, as we call them, so the entities that we're awarding can be academia, can be industry, can be NGOs. We have kind of the gamut, and the way that we are able to fund so many entities and around the world is that we do have a more flexible kind of contracting based approach to funding. We don't fund by grants. We fund by, it's going to get a little wonky, but maybe there's a few people out there who will appreciate this. We fund under other transactions. We have an OT authority or under cooperative agreements. And these allow us to move fast, to have a wider range of performers, perhaps, and allow us to have more bespoke terms within those contracts, so that our performers, as we call them, they're performing against specific milestones and metrics, so that our performers are able to do what they need to do on the timelines that they're under.
And I just want to interrupt for 1 second, Savannah, to say that we're going to be having an ARPA-H discussion with folks who can address contracting questions, the different types of mechanisms. We did get some pre-submitted questions about that. So really, we're going to try to kind of get more in the weeds. For example, I have a big bet in mind. What is the exact next step I would take? I think those kind of questions where you kind of just get into the left brain, like, how do I do this, can stop a lot of great ideas, from coming. So
you're totally right, Ellie. We want to remove those barriers, those blockers, and make sure teams feel that they can focus on the science, they can focus on the mission, and we'll figure out how to get there. We'll figure out kind of what they need to do that. And so if you're going to have a follow-up contracting with the experts here, we have I think a world-class contract team to talk to. I'm just the messenger, I guess, in this particular instance.
No, that's great. And another question we got, if you don't mind, Savannah, just back to international affairs for a moment, is a concern, I think, a rightful concern of many in the global health community, in particular, that there's been a bit of a helicopter model sometimes. I think it doesn't just attend to science, that sometimes there might be lack of involvement of the low and middle income countries that are part of global research projects. Is that we were talking a little bit about folks on your team. Is that part of kind of your thinking and how ARPA-H is being mindful as they kind of work on projects going forward?
Yeah, so just to make clear for the audience, we're not a capacity building agency. We don't do foreign assistance, and we do see our partners around the world as partners. We have the ability to both fund directly international entities to do this work. And we also have the ability to collaborate and, see prior comment about our contracting division or business innovation division, finding ways to work collaboratively, cooperating across borders in the United States, but also around the world. So we very much see our performers as those partners and absolutely like instrumental in the outcome of this work. So it's not dropping in and just kind of giving money and disappearing. And in fact, there's a couple key points here. Program managers, it's a high contact sport. They are involved in the day-to-day performance of the entities they're funding. And so it is that partnership, that conversation. How are you doing? Is it working?
Right.
What resources do you need? Is there something we're missing? How can we keep you on track? And that's an important piece in that partnership. But also, we have this amazing office called Patio, and they're our transition-focused office. And I just, if I could spend a moment on them. I know you didn't really ask about this, but they need a shout out because kind of unlike DARPA, ARPA-H doesn't have a buyer at the end of the lifetime of our programs. We don't have a prescribed path to being picked up and used. Whereas an entity like DARPA has DoD at the other end to really invest in the
and BARDA often has an advanced purchase agreement or
right. And we don't we don't have that. We have the healthcare system, and that is vast. And so an important part of what we do, and a kind of a service that comes with being a program manager and running these programs, is that there's a transition capability built in from cradle to grave of a program. They're working hand in hand with this Patio office to kind of demystify that transition pathway. We won't fund forever. So what happens to these inventions at the other end? Yeah, so we need to talk to both the customer base, that's domestic and international, and the investor base, domestic and international. Even if even if we don't have international collaborators on a project, we are always thinking about where else in the world can these inventions reach, and how can we work with those communities? Do they want it? Do they need it? And if so, how can we get it out there? We're much too early to say how those are panning out, but that's the vision for what we're doing and how I'm working with the transition team.
I think you said something important, because it's an issue that sometimes comes up for NIH too, that in the statutory language around ARPA-H and NIH, they are explicitly not development. They don't have a development function in the U.S. government, so they are constrained in certain ways. And unless that statute changes, that's where we have. I think that was really insightful and great to hear. And Savannah, I'm turning back to you because I'm going to zip it.
No problem. It's great that we have so many questions to ask from all angles. So yeah, I think this is a little bit of a continuation, and we're talking about those big bet ideas. And I was wondering if you could speak more about the mechanism and timeline for selecting and announcing those big bet ideas in the health arena that ARPA-H is funding.
So we kind of the big bets, we hope they're all big bets, but the selection really comes down two tracks. One is through our signature programs, and when you hire a program manager, you're selecting a research focus area, and the program managers pitch these programs to ARPA-H and our leadership team and our director, Dr. Wegerson, and we say, yes, sounds great. we give them, we bring them on board, and they come into the agency and develop that program idea further. And there's a lot of discovery work, a lot of conversations, refining that proposal. They're thinking about the transition. They're thinking about kind of what the milestones and the metrics would be, what's the cost, et cetera, et cetera. And they use those Heilmeyer questions that you've probably heard of through DARPA. We've added some others to tailor it to help. But they really come in-house and they shape that program, and then they go through the process of approval, where our director says, okay, you're approved. I'm making it sound very simple, but it's more like a thesis defense with a lot of people firing questions at you. You're approved, and her form of approval is giving them then that bank account to run their program. And at that point, they have quite a bit of, if not complete, autonomy to shape kind of how that program is going to roll out and how those performers perform along the years of the program. So that's kind of the main track, if that's what you're asking, timelines and whatnot. And it all moves very fast. The other track is really an open call. So this is also valuable, I think, for the community here online to hear, is that we have this kind of rolling open call for great research ideas. And these can be ideas. So we have 11 programs, I think 11 right now. They don't cover everything. They cover a lot, but they don't cover everything in health. We obviously hope to get there, have more like 50, 60, 70 programs right now versus 11. But in the meantime, we have this open call where you can just submit your great research ideas and they can be picked up and funded as projects. Okay. And so in that instance, they are meant to be more like seedlings in a way, although, we do have some very significant investments that have come out of that open call, including our DARTS project, which is a really important investment in antimicrobial resistance, surveillance, diagnostics, and therapeutic decision-making. And so those are really the two tracks. And if I may kind of add a third that is we've just piloted and we're really excited about, is the Sprint for Women's Health. And so we have this sprint capability where we can kind of pull together multiple program managers in the service of one bigger goal. And in this case, it was women's health. And then program managers could pick specific areas of women's health that fit within their remit and can also then fund the community. And they had two different tracks, kind of, I think a Spark, maybe that was a $3 million track, and then a Launchpad, a 10 million, a more mature idea, $10 million track. So we're also kind of innovating in the different ways that, other than programs, how can we pull in those really meritorious and exciting and cutting edge research ideas?
That's great. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to jump in with two quick items, really. We had at least two pre-submitted questions, and I think one that's real time about about equity, diversity, equity, inclusivity. And I know you and I were talking about this, and we were thinking this is such a big topic, potentially of doing kind of a session on that in particular, a listening session, and with ARPA-H engaging. But I also know, Megan, you mentioned that there's going to be a new director that is relevant to these questions. And I was wondering if you could just mention that the role that you were discussing with me.
Yes, thank you, Ellie, for giving me the chance to talk about that. Before my shameless plug for our ELSI coordinator position here at the agency, I think equity is just such an important part of everything we do. Our director has very intentionally built this into the DNA of the organization. And we have a fact sheet online if you wanted to read more about it, but certainly committed to advancing the health outcomes for all. And we really mean all. And I think more than just lip service, to it, you can see through already our early programs what they're doing in this space. Our Heroes program that's really trying to incentivize new models for preventative medicine and community-based care, and the Paradigm program, which is going out into rural communities, making sure they have, you know, high-level primary care, and really meeting those patients where they are, making sure they're not driving 5 hours or flying to another state to get high-level care. And so those kind of mobile platforms to be able to do that, and what's needed to turn that into an actual paradigm of high-level care. So we are actively investing in programs that pull in equity in that way. But also we very intentionally put equity at the center of our ARPA-H. And so we have a hub and spoke model. Congress made us have 3 locations. I don't know if people know this, but we have to have 3 locations. So we naturally have 1 in DC. We said, what are we going to do with these other 2? We'll compete them for locations around the country. We're not going to kind of cherry pick them. And what we ended up with was a hub in Dallas focused on customer experience or community engagement, and then a hub in Boston focused on investor engagement, or the Investor Catalyst hub. And these hubs have spokes which reach out into those communities. And this ties back to what I said about the transition potential. We need to know how patients and caregivers, end users of these technologies are going to respond. Some of these things people will never have seen before. Right. So we need to know and build that in iteratively into the trajectory of the program. Same with investment. Who's investing at the other end of this? Who's going to take that technology and turn it into something that's not just sitting on a shelf, but actually delivering for people everywhere? So equity is especially important in that customer experience hub, where we can very thoughtfully, intentionally engage communities. That's kind of what's built into the agency. ELSI, as perhaps a related component of this, is the ethical, legal, social implications of what we do. And our director started a lot of ELSI work at DARPA, and we are making sure that this is a core component across the entire ARPA-H agency. And so this is being mindful of all the ethical, legal, social issues that could arise over the course of a program, and being able to mitigate against those and design appropriately to be conscientious of those issues. So we've done a lot of work over the last year. We've had listening sessions, we had an RFI, we've had a nice report done for us on this and how to execute this, and now building out that framework. And we are actively hiring for an ELSI coordinator expert position to work with every single program manager on what is the unique ELSI features or issues that they're encountering in their program, and then how are we responding to those? How are we factoring those into the program? This is a really cool position, in my opinion.
Hint, hint to the audience.
And working internally, but also working with the external community. There's no one person that knows everything about ELSI. There's no one person that knows everything about the unique ethical, legal, social issues in an area of science, in particular communities. And so there will be a lot of external engagement along the way. And I can't give too much away, but this person will come in and shape that. So we're still hiring for that.
Perfect. I mean, 2 other quick questions, or at least something to think through. So we've gotten a couple of questions about IP, just basically how it works, who owns the IP, how that filters down. I'm wondering if maybe Eric and others, if we can include that in the contracting discussion, just because it could take a little time to work through the various scenarios. So I'm using my hands a lot today. So why don't we pledge to do that? I believe that is a scheduled ARPA-H session, but I could be wrong. Jacqueline, who is right now in the background, knows this for a fact. So Jacqueline, if we do have a date, if you wouldn't mind putting it into the chat, otherwise we'll get back to you all soon. And then we had a question about that resonates with another question that came in earlier about your personal experience, your expertise in the area of security and science and technology, and whether there isn't a facet, not development, but diplomacy, a facet of science diplomacy, some kind that actually in a way feeds into our security and global and national security. Do you perceive that as part of your role at ARPA-H?
Yeah, so absolutely. I believe very strongly in the integral nature of international collaboration to achieving positive health outcomes for everyone, but also our health security, of course, domestically, but certainly globally. And so I think that over the course of my time at state, being fortunate to spend some time on our National Security Council staff working on global health security and biodefense. And then now coming to ARPA-H, it's hard to disentangle them all. I'm a huge champion for bringing together the unique perspectives, experiences, and capabilities around the world. These health challenges are so hard. There is just really no way, in my opinion, one country can go it alone.
Right.
And so both from knowing that melting pot of bringing together everything from around the world to inspire novelty and creativity in these solutions, that's one thing. As a practical matter, it's just important that we put our heads together, both to force multiply on this work, but also to deconflict, where we see, we can't all be also working on the exact same thing. And a lot of this kind of came together really nicely as we build out our international engagements here in portfolio. We're starting to take trips, which is exciting. These ecosystem trips that we're going to be taking around the world to really learn from, connect with, find out what everybody's funding, what everybody's excited about, what scares everybody. And so this kind of ties into the security side. What are some of the health security challenges that are being faced? And we were just in the UK and talked a lot about some of these just super challenging issues, that where can we start to all work together, and where can ARPA-H play a role? Biosurveillance, for example, antimicrobial resistance was a big theme of the week with the UK AMR envoy, Dame Sally Davies, doing a high-level event with the British government, which was just phenomenal in raising awareness of that issue. So in a way that was diplomacy, but in a way it was also, sorry, on the part of Dame Sally, but it was also a practical matter. Let's get all the right people in the right room, and let's get some solutions underway and some commitments and real investments. So it's all intertwined. Ellie, I'd have a hard time kind of separating it out.
Yeah, no, I think, but I think it speaks to ARPA-H's role. I mean, that it's, to serve the United States, you need to, engage with partners and get her done globally. So Savannah, do you have another pre-submitted question? I know I'm seeing questions coming in the chat that are so great and so tempting, but I want to make sure that we honor our commitment here.
Yeah, we luckily, like I said, we luckily have a lot, and I know we're running short on time, so I think this one might be a little more straightforward. We talked about the different mechanisms of funding. Still a little questions about how the review process works, like kind of maybe comparing that to the NIH review process.
Oh, well, you might want, in addition to a contracting session, you might want to have some program managers, because they all go about this in different ways. And but by and large, the biggest difference is that we don't have peer review or study section.
Okay.
And so it's leveraging kind of the wider US government community and other pathways. I'll let the program managers weigh in on the different ways that they bring that expertise to bear on their review process. But that is the biggest difference. And that is one of the ways that allows us to take the big bets, to undergo or to invest in risky areas. If there was a lot of peer review, and having been an editor, if there's a lot of peer review, you can find some of the riskier, more forward-leaning pieces could fall off, and we want to avoid that. We really want to challenge ourselves and learn from it. So that's the biggest difference in the review process, I would say. But a huge plug to have some program managers talk about the ways that they do it.
Yeah, and I think if I'm hearing you right, it's a different kind of review that works for different types of research, right? And so I think it makes sense. You're you're a later stage kind of big project area. So really, really interesting. Absolutely. And so, Megan and audience, we've had some questions that came in about specific types of areas. One that's important is oral health. Dental, I think that we, Megan, my take is that since we have about 6 or 7 of those, it would be very difficult. And I think one answer, let me ask you this, is an answer if the big idea comes in, then then that's an area that you would consider is.
Yeah, so there's, I'm sorry I can't open the chat or else I would be too distracted, but I've seen a couple pop up in this vein, and we don't prescribe program areas. Those really do need to come in through the program manager. So again, another shameless plug for if you have a great idea and you want to run a research program, run it like a business with a lot of autonomy, you might want to consider being a program manager at ARPA-H. But another way to come in is through that open call and to submit those ideas. And that includes the international community. So we will fund meritorious projects from around the world. There are some exceptions to this in our statute around a few countries that we won't fund: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. That's in our statute. So legally we cannot do that. But by and large, there are very few caveats to this. So we want to fund around the world. We're very interested in expanding into spaces that touch on global health. What are some of those, we like to say ARPA hard. What are some of those ARPA hard challenges where there needs to be that focus, that energy, that kind of short-term sprint or investment that could catalyze more work in a space? So what are those tough challenges across borders where we might be able to invest that also, of course, delivers for Americans? So, some of the things that we continue to look at, and I mentioned biosurveillance as one, but there's a lot of cross-border challenges that I think could, that I hope we see some proposals in, and we see some very invested program managers in.
So Megan, may I grab you for one more question that's come in that I think is really important? Lots of understandable questions about getting more into the international arena, given your role. And I think one question has to do with, has there been engagement outside of Europe and into Africa and other continents? And would you mind answering that for us? And I know there are other questions in the chat, but I think that one is kind of emblematic.
Yeah, such an important question. And I mentioned that we want to start visiting these ecosystems, and we can do a lot here in DC. There's a lot of embassies in DC, so quite a bit of outreach there. But we also want to get out from behind Washington, get out from behind our desks, and immerse ourselves in other ecosystems around the world, and kind of learn how care is delivered. Learn how innovation kind of happens on the floor, on site. What are those experiences? And I think it's an imperative that we aren't just looking at kind of the excellent the excellent countries around the world with such robust research programs. There is a lot of innovation all over the world, including in developing and emerging economies, that we want to make sure we're uncovering, and we are encouraging to engage us on their research ideas and their solutions to some of these challenges. They will have unique perspectives that I really want to bring to light. We really want to bring to light. And so we are going to be very intentional about making sure, yes, our first trip was to the UK, but wanting to make sure that we are talking to everyone. I think at this point, and I believe Rachel's online from my team, I think we've talked to over 50 countries at this point in just the last few months on what makes them tick, what they're excited about, and how we might work together. And so definitely want to reach widely around the world.
Great. And you know, we'll be continuing to pursue that with you in terms of, you know, how that happens. How can a research entity, you know, in Africa, for example, engage? What would be the best way to engage? So we'll be following up with those in the audience, with all of our Alliance members. But I think we've hit our time, which is so sad and awful. Because you've been so great to talk to.
Thank you.
And I have to do a shameless plug for our early career research workshop, which is happening each week in June. And the first one's tomorrow. It's a career tour and it's super cool. I know some of the folks that are tour guides, I guess, whatever, and they're wonderful. So Jacqueline, if you could put that in the chat. And otherwise look for invitations. We have more Alliance discussions to come. And again, Megan, thank you so much. And you know, we'll be in touch. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all, and very happy to continue the conversation and learn about some of the best practices in reaching out to the excellent research communities around the world. Another shameless plug, you can reach us at international@arpa-h.gov. We love to hear your ideas, and we really do want to connect. So thank you so much, Ellie and
Terrific.
Savannah and Jacqueline, for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and have a great day,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks.